Today's video is going to be about marathon traits, or the traits that a successful marathon runner should really have in play. So I've gleaned these traits over the years. I've ran over 20 marathons. I've done 10 marathons in 10 days, and I've trained numerous runners over the marathon distance. So I feel that these traits have come up again and again, either in my own running or with runners that I have coached. So trait number one, and for me, this one underpins all the other traits, and that is that of adaptability. We are not professional runners at the end of the day. And if we're not professional runners, we're going to have things outside of life that are going to impinge and impact on us in many different ways. If we don't learn a way to move round or over a problem and look at a problem in a different way, then we are going to find that our training is not going to be so successful. Plus, you need to be able to adapt when you are actually running the marathon. So your training is training you to be more adaptable. Because imagine, on race day, let's say it's hotter than you've expected, you will have to adapt to those outside circumstances. If you do not, then you will have a very difficult and a less satisfying run than you would have actually had. So adaptability is absolutely crucial for all marathon runners. And this is why I use it as my trait number one that I really do look for in runners that I coach. One of the things I say about adaptability to my runners is that the plan is a map. It's not the actual territory. So a lot of runners will get very focused on a plan, and like all things, there's a paradox to be had. Plan gives you structure, and that is great. What it shouldn't be is something that bends you out of shape. So I like to think of it as a structure for freedom. You've got that structure, but then you need to be able to adapt it and know when you need to adapt it so that you get the best from the plan and the best from yourself too. The next trait is endurance. Now, this may not be a big surprise to you. It's pretty obvious. You've got to run 26.2 miles, and on average, the average kind of runner will do it in 4, maybe 5 hours. That's a long time on your feet. So endurance has to be there. No brainer, right? However, many runners do end up at marathons with not a very high level of endurance. The reason for this is the types of runs that they tend to do, or not do is more accurate. So I put endurance in here because you've got to make sure that the plan, the system that you have in place is building up that endurance. Because if not, then you're going to find that on race day, the run will always be tough. A marathon is hard work. There's no getting away from that. But you will find that you have come to a gunfight with a very, very, very small knife. So endurance is my second trait that you've got to build up to have a successful training regime, and plus that successful, or a better chance of a successful race day. The next trait is being consistent and resilient. This is key for marathon runners. Often they feel they have trained more than they actually have. Now, I'm not one to advocate overtraining, obviously, but you need that consistency. And that's why, you've got a plan, but you also should make sure that you have some way of either journaling or being aware of just how consistent or not that you may have been on any period of time. Now, we're not talking about being perfect. As I said earlier, you need to adapt, you need to change sometimes. However, you do have to be aware of consistency, because if your consistency is, you think it's here, but it's actually there, then you've guessed it, you are not going to build up the endurance that I mentioned earlier to actually be able to perform the marathon at its best. And that's why consistency is right up there. Now, part of consistency is being more resilient. You're going to need that resiliency within, a marathon run, and marathon training really hard bakes in resiliency because you need to be more resilient. According to a study in the Journal of Applied Sports Physiology, I can never say that word. I've rehearsed that word so many times. Physiology. I've said it. Runners who exhibit higher levels of resilience are more likely to bounce back from poor performances or injuries, demonstrating a positive correlation between resilience and long-term success, and dealing with minor setbacks in runs. So, in training runs, when something doesn't go quite right, I have runners that really dwell on that. And then there's others, what can I learn from this? How can I move forward? This resiliency is then taken into race day. What about if something unsettles you a bit? Perhaps something you've planned doesn't go as well. Adaptability again, you see. But resiliency is part of that. And you need to kind of start hard baking that in to your training so that on race day, you've got that resiliency. One little extra tip I would say, and obviously take this into account from a safety perspective, but sometimes running on your own without music builds in that resiliency. And also this is connected to mental toughness, or the inner game as I call it, which we're coming to next. Next is having a strong inner game or having a strong mindset. A key trait is to obviously have what I call a strong inner game. One of the real things you can do to gain this is to have a really strong why you want to do a marathon, why you want to train for a marathon. If you can get that really built in, it can be something positive, it can be something negative. I've used negatives, like people who didn't think I could do a thing. I've used that to power me forward. It's not always positivity, but some sort of why that you can utilize. Also, because you can learn mental strength, it's not about something you've always had. Generally, people who've got good mental strength have faced adversity. So you don't want to do something that overwhelms you, but you can start doing little difficult things throughout your day. Training is part of that. It starts to build in fatigue and other factors that build up that mental strength. However, you can do little difficult things throughout the day. Getting up 10 minutes earlier really starts to reverse the chattering monkey that you've got in your brain that is always looking for comfort. That is what your brain wants. It always wants to go for the easiest route A to B. Now, mental toughness is sometimes when you can only go from A to D in one go, and your brain's going, you can't do that, you can't do that. So by building in little things like getting up earlier or doing 10 seconds in a shower cold, it's building into that resistance that you can do this. And it builds mental strength in micro ways. Because of course, if you do something that's so overwhelming, you go, well, I'm going to build my mental strength. I'm going to go off a 100-foot bungee jump. It's too much. So you want to put in what I call 1%ers, and they can help build up that mental strength as well. Because you will need it within training. It's a long time. It's 16 to 18 weeks, which we're going to come to in a moment. And so you need that mental strength for that. And also you need that mental strength when you're actually performing the marathon on the marathon day. But don't believe that it's just something you're born with. People who have got it have usually got it through some level of adversity. Whilst you don't want to put yourself through adversity, you can put yourself through challenges. And let's face it, you're doing marathon training that can build that up like a muscle. A bit of mental strength facts here. Research suggests that mental skills such as self-talk, goal setting, as I mentioned earlier, imagery, can improve running performance by 1 to 2% and are often employed by elite athletes to enhance their mental toughness. When you consider that sometimes we buy shoes with carbon in them that will improve our performance by 1, 2, 3, or maybe 4%, actually increasing your mental capacity to withstand discomfort could improve your marathon times by 1 to 2%. So that's why it's such an important trait. And finally, the final traits are discipline and patience. You will need discipline to train for a marathon. It's not the same as the social media friendly motivation. Yay! Because motivation will come and go. And if you rely on motivation, you won't get a lot of training done. The reality is training for a marathon's hard. Sometimes you won't want to go out for a run. You're just going to have to grind it out. Not sexy, not motivation, not going to appear on Instagram, but that's the reality. That is why it's a trait of all successful marathon runners. However, you also need patience because a training block can be 12, 18 weeks. If you are going to expect results quickly, and I know runners that do in this instance, as I mentioned earlier, you need endurance. Endurance doesn't, even if you've done some endurance running, to build up upon that, then you will need time. You will need patience. Runners who keep looking under the bonnet, wondering if their engine is big enough after 3 weeks, they get frustrated, they get demotivated. So you need that discipline to, as I said right at the beginning, adapt, but you need the discipline to get out there, and you need the patience, because just because your brain wants something, your brain is often cashing money that your body yet doesn't have. It's like a bank account. When you first start, if you start trying to do something beyond what you can do, or you haven't got the patience or the discipline to build up deposits, then you are going to be quickly overdrawn, and that's why you will get tired or injured. So patience and discipline are key. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video and got something from it. If you have, share below, and if there's traits that you think I've missed, why not get them and comment on them, and I'd love to see and hear what they are. As I said, these are traits that I see in most successful marathon runners. I'm sure there are others, but I hope you enjoyed the video and speak to you really soon. Bye for now.